All right, let's dive in. Today we're digging into the history of southern Ukraine and Crimea. Now, this is a region that's often painted with a very specific and honestly a deeply misleading brush. So, let's get right into it.
So, have you ever heard of the wild field? It's this story you hear a lot, this idea of a vast, empty wasteland. But you have to ask, is that really the whole picture? Or is there a much richer, way more complex history buried just beneath the surface? A history that, maybe, was deliberately hidden? That's the big question we're going to tackle.
And this right here, this quote really gets to the heart of it. This is the core myth we're talking about, the idea that southern Ukraine and Crimea were basically a blank slate, a civilizational vacuum, just waiting for the Russian Empire to show up in the 18th century. But, okay, what does the actual evidence have to say?
Well, to figure that out, we've got to go back. And I mean way back. We're not talking a few centuries here. We're talking millennia. We're going to peel back the layers of history and see what was really going on at this incredible crossroads of civilizations.
Just look at this timeline. It reveals a seriously stunning depth of history. This was never an empty land. I mean, think about it. All the way back in the 8th century BC, you've got these sophisticated cultures like the Cimmerians and the Scythians. Then the ancient Greeks arrive, setting up cities along the coast. Fast forward a bit, Turkic people start to become dominant, and by the 15th century, you have the highly organized Crimean Khanate. This is a story of continuous civilization, one layer right on top of another. And listen, this isn't some kind of modern reinterpretation. We can look at medieval texts like the Primary Chronicle, which is a huge deal, a foundational document for Eastern European history, and see that they recognize this region as a major player. The Greeks called it Great Scythia. You just don't give a name like Great Scythia to an empty wasteland, right?
This place was a true melting pot. Seriously, you had Scythians, Greek colonists, Armenians, and of course the indigenous Turkic peoples of Crimea, the Crimean Tatars, the Turkic-speaking Jewish Krimchaks, and the Katarite Jews. For literally millennia, this peninsula was this vibrant, multi-ethnic hub of activity.
Okay, so this story keeps going right into the Middle Ages. And the best part is, we're not just relying on old texts anymore. We have solid, physical proof of a really developed society that existed right before the era of Russian expansion. And how do we know this? Well, the truth is literally lying just beneath the surface. The key to unlocking all this is modern archaeology. By digging into the earth, we can uncover the hard facts that certain historical narratives tried so hard to bury. Let's take a look at the Tai Hin fortress, for example, over in the Kherson region. Excavations there have turned up some incredible stuff from the 14th and 15th centuries. And we're not talking about just a few potsherds. We're talking about a ceramic water pipe system. That is advanced urban infrastructure for the time. Archaeologists also found metal accessories that prove ties to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and decorative styles that link it directly to the culture of the Crimean Khanate. This wasn't some backwater. This was a connected, sophisticated trade center. But here's the real kicker, the most crucial finding of all. In all those layers from the 14th and 15th centuries at Tai Hin, archaeologists found tons of evidence of Ukrainian Cossacks, Lithuanians, and Crimean Tatars. But you know what they didn't find? Not a single artifact connected to Russian material culture. Zero. The development of this region was happening completely independently.
So that raises a pretty big question, doesn't it? If this incredibly rich history existed, where did it go? How did this myth of the wild field even start? Well, that's what we're looking at next, how a vibrant, real history was systematically erased and replaced.
You see, when the Russian Empire arrived in the late 18th century, it wasn't a project of creation. It was an act of conquest and colonization, plain and simple. The Zaporozhian Sich, that semi-autonomous Cossack state, was wiped out in 1775. Then, the Crimean Khanate was annexed in 1783. This wasn't building something new from scratch, it was a takeover.
And one of the most powerful tools in any colonial playbook is renaming places. Think about it. It's a kind of symbolic violence. You're literally erasing the past from the map itself. The ancient settlement of Kajibe, it gets renamed Odessa. The Crimean Tatar capital, Akhmeset, becomes Simferopol. All these indigenous Turkic and Slavic names were just wiped away and replaced with new, Greek-sounding ones, all to invent a brand new imperial history for the region.
So let's just break this all down. Fact versus fiction. The myth says civilizational vacuum. The reality? Developed trade centers and fortresses going back to the 14th century. The myth calls it a wild field. The reality? A complex political borderland with its own economic systems. The myth claims the Russians founded all these cities. The reality? So many of those imperial cities were built right on top of existing Cossack or Tatar settlements. And the myth of a demographic desert? No way. It was home to a rich mix of people: Crimean Tatars, Krimchaks, Kurites, and Zaporozhian Cossacks.
And this process of erasure, it all culminated in one year, 1944. This is when the Soviet regime carried out the final, absolutely brutal act. They forcibly deported the entire Crimean Tatar population, along with other indigenous groups, from their ancestral homeland, using the false accusation of collaboration as a pretext.
Okay, so I know what you might be thinking. Why does all this ancient history matter? We're talking about stuff from centuries, even millennia ago. But the thing is, it is incredibly important today. It has direct, and I mean direct, relevance to the world we're living in right now.
So let's really ask ourselves that question. Why does a 2,500-year-old history matter today? Does a history that stretches all the way back to the Scythians and the ancient Greeks actually have any bearing on what's happening in the 21st century? The answer is absolutely yes.
It's because these historical myths, ideas like Novorossiya or the Wild Field, they aren't just dusty old academic arguments. Not at all. They're actively used today as justification for war. Disinformation is one of the most powerful tools of hybrid warfare. And when that disinformation is about history, well, understanding the real history becomes one of the most powerful ways to fight back.
And that really brings us to our final thought. What happens when a nation's past is rewritten? The history of southern Ukraine shows us that the past is never really just the past. It's a battleground. So it leaves us with a really critical question. What are the consequences, not just for one country, but for all of us, when a nation's history is deliberately erased and rewritten to serve the ambitions of the present?